Oh, okay. On the, I'm gonna fix that, but. Hi.
Am I stopping?
Very nice. How are you? Yeah.
And share additional copies.
All right, who's LaSalle?
Yes.
Do we know who you are? The person that has LaSalle, can we know who you are, please? Can you see you? Hello?
You got everything, I was wondering. Pretty sure I did.
Person that's on the screen that shows up as the name LaSalle. Could you please identify yourself?
Check with the.
Oh, whose bag is on this computer or it's shared with your. Okay, we just found it.
Yeah.
Your bag is. Walter's Creek. Yeah, okay.
You don't take that.
Okay, now we have a forum.
Good. All right, so welcome everybody to the July 20th meeting of the MNRCC.
Some macaroni salad, some.
Recent days to be here. And so we now have a forum, so I can ask for, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda today. Do I get a second? Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the May 18th minutes, which were distributed very nicely by the staff. I'll make a motion to accept. Second.
Second.
Okay. Any corrections, anything? Motion, all in favor? Okay, thank you. So my chair's report was distributed. It's going to be a busy month.
Yeah.
It was a busy month. And, we got to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Metro North. And watching the Metro North number 40, number 2 is sitting right next to me. So it was nice that he was at the ceremony for the staff as well. And if you have any questions that would have written here, with the assistance of the staff to fill in on the last minute details. The fares were raised by the board yesterday. One has the Metro North on this side of the Hudson, and because of the fare inequity and lack of comparable service on the west side of the Hudson, we're fighting. It was decided that we would not have our fares raised. Which was
I would say, I would just add thanks to
yes.
your showing the inequity and demonstrating that because of the that the 10% decrease hadn't been afforded to us, the Hudson riders during while the other East of Hudson lines had received that during previous times that
Doing that instead, it wouldn't cost the fares. Excuse me, the fares in New York Station is going to be lower than the fares in Jersey. That couldn't happen. So and they based the what they were going to raise the fares on, not what the regular ticket should have cost, monthly ticket, but on the reduced fare, which would have made it we really had a big inequity.
but
So,
it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't led the way there.
Yeah.
So
and something that slipped by the NT. So I'm glad that's over. We wish that back to the staff or getting it whatever you did. I think Rich for you didn't get to read it, but offering to read the statement, which he surrendered. Well,
I channeled you.
so this nothing further on this.
I also did thank Mike and Ross on Friday.
Yes, of course, yes.
For their testimony.
You guys did very well. Former administrator here, right? How many hearings did you chair for those things when you were at Metro North?
Yeah. Those were always fun.
There was, from what we understand, an extraordinarily low number of, participants this time. We think it possibly because of the rent hearings have just gone through and they're sucked the air out of that room in a lot of places. But
You could remember that in the future for Stanley.
right. There was, we requested to get more and more people to testify. So we did, and thank you for rising to the occasion.
The guy who chaired did a good job.
I'm sorry.
The fellow who chaired the meeting did a very good job.
Yes.
We had one of those where people were throwing tokens at the people that were podium at the table.
I remember, yeah, 4-hour meetings, 5-hour meetings in person when I first started. It was interesting times to walk into. And what a difference with the hybrid option.
And it's the one who participated, all of them. I did the first one remote in person and the other 3 remotely. I was very happy that we didn't have to spend the whole 3 hours doing that. All right. We had discussion of the Westchester County, so I will turn over to the Westchester County people to fill us in on how that meeting went.
I think between Mike's, recap and mine, we probably have the full gist of it. I guess what I would say is, I think it's great that we have a working relationship with our county executive.
Should be.
They are supportive. And I think it's up to us to continue to maintain that, keep them informed. And, just take their input as well. And they're specifically interested in just the Westchester group's perspective. And they invited us to, come back periodically and report and so forth. So anything else you want to? And of course, we'll follow up on the forum. Those online, Francis, or any other?
We had talked about the New Haven service and the concern we had that if they start slashing service in Connecticut at the behest of the governor there, it's going to impact people in Westchester as well, and how we're going to work through that. I did suggest that they liaison with the governor's office up there, and I assume they are doing that. We'll see.
Kind of like was not on their radar yet.
Right.
Who we made, but they were supportive. I don't know where, I don't know if we've gotten any more information out of Connecticut on where the implementation of this.
So,
I'm waiting to see what Connecticut.
Kathy is in touch with them about today.
Kathy's in touch with them. I know Metro North staff are in touch with them. The Metro North Union folks, labor folks that you talked to are speaking with folks in the governor's office. It was suggested that the county executive making a call to the governor's office would be very helpful as well. Maybe coordinating with Kathy on messaging, but that any reduction in service at this point would just be catastrophic, particularly given the pledge to not print service.
It's not just the pledge. At least in Lower Westchester, the proliferation of apartments around, all New Rochelle is now are these huge apartments. And you've got to accommodate those people because they are there because they're coming into the city.
And I think that that's the same thing in Lower Connecticut, at least. That there's that, you build it so they will come and then they will ride the trains and then it's a foolhardy mission to remove service. And I think that there are almost 2 fights. One is the Shoreline East reduction in service, and the other is the New Haven line reduction. And it's terrible to sort of break them apart, but we have a sort of a specific person of race. That it's terrible to reduce any service
Sure.
at a time when we want to increase service and see more people on transit, especially with congestion pricing.
I think there's another component to that because when you say reduce service, I need to hear that we reduce service because it worked in the remote work schedule. So I haven't heard an analysis of when people are going in, because just for example, we had the peak fares Monday through Friday and off-peak fares on the weekend. Now, everybody's going in on the weekend, so does that model still work? And that's just the kind of thing I think we need to look at in order to have a better understanding of the full picture. And one other thought that I just want to reinforce here, they talked a lot about having the Westchester V-Line buses free. And they said having that free period increase their ridership
35%.
35%.
Really?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, after we raise the rates, do we consider having a rider appreciation period? And I know that would be a lot of money, but if you didn't do anything but to say, okay, we raised your rates and we have a rider appreciation period between 2 hours or 4 hours on one day or something, it's just a thought.
I would say,
Concerned that many of the passengers don't use Metro cards.
yeah,
Apparently, the majority of the passengers pay cash fares. And $2.90 is a heck of a lot of coins to put into a fare box. So they were wondering how to deal with that as well. And I didn't say this, but I don't understand why the fare in Westchester has to be the same as the fare on the MTA subways. There were times when the buses in several private bus companies in Queens, the fare was cheaper than the subway. And if you got on one of those, you paid, let's say it was, I don't know what, for example.
Probably before it's now a single fare zone.
Now it is, now the MTA took it all over, yeah.
I think it's
You used to pay the cheaper fare, and then when you get on the subway, it charged you the difference. And the system was sophisticated enough to do that.
Well,
So,
I think that Omni is gonna make the difference. It's just not here yet fully. It would be good to know what the timetable for Omni integration in Westchester is on the B line, because $2.90 is a lot of coin.
And I can tell you,
But if there's city buses don't take bills. So does it make a difference if you have to have $2.75 in coins or $2.90 in coins?
it does.
I mean, obviously it does, but it's still a lot of coin. Express buses do take dollars, but the transition to a tap really system is gonna make a difference. And there's contactless pay where you don't need to have a bank account and you don't need to have a smartphone, but you could use just a tap card along the lines on the would be helpful for the people that don't have Metro cards.
So one thing that Joan and we were interested in is possibly having Andrew communicate more about the fares and the changes, because people really haven't been riding the railroad, and just having a better sense of how to maximize the cost effectiveness of fares and communicating that, and how you can buy tickets and so forth would be helpful.
So it's unbelievably complicated, the fare structure. And in fact, it's the subject of a report that Ryan and Kara have diligently been working on for quite some time. And that will that I think we've spoken about, but that we're really looking at more now in the context of the Omni, the slide into Omni, because that is, we understand that the fare increases are going through. As Jenna said yesterday, that I have a different piece of paper, but basically we'll be back here in 15 months. When they look at different pilots and different cost structures for the railroad. So that's an analysis opportunity for a better fare structure. Because it is sort of different railroads, not just on Metro North territory, but Metro North and Long Island, that are cobbled together almost, and that have been efforts have been made to rationalize, but it's not good. Yeah. So, there have been attempts as recently as this week, the guy who writes for Law LIR today made this whole proposal on how to rationalize Long Island Railroad fares, which is great. But, one of the first things he did was essentially point out that there's 30 different fare types. Yeah, there are, and then you look at in the Bronx now, there is intra-Bronx travel, which would make it less to use one of those fares in a city ticket, and certainly less than if we moved Atlantic ticket principles over here with the weekly. So it may have been rational, but now it's an opportunity with the coming of Omni to make sense. In terms of an analysis for ridership and when people are riding, I don't believe that in fact has been undertaken as an exercise of let's cut service to 86% of ridership, given that's how many people are taking the train per the Connecticut budget decision. I think it was just like 86% of people are riding the train, so let's just do away with the rest of them.
I think it was sold, just from what I read, I think it was sold in Hartford as a targeted reduction on Mondays and Fridays. And it is just a 1 year reduction. It's a biennial budget and reduction only in the first year. So there was some thought behind it, but obviously it didn't work that way.
Right.
We did actually talk about the fair report in the county executive meeting. When we move forward with that, we should probably share, at least executive summary.
Yeah, there was being a little bit retooling of it for the look forward, as a, and then I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, fair vote and with a lot of the feedback that you had provided and also the county executive meeting notes that you had shared as well.
I just want to go back to the service. Before I knew about CAC back in this early 80s, there was a community volunteer group of people in Rockland County called TAC, Transportation Advisory Council. Warren gets former league vice chair, and the others were on there. It was always the same people, chairman, vice chairman, secretary. We rotated because there were already people who wanted to join it. And New Jersey Transit had a fiscal crisis. Hello, still have one. And so they threatened to cut service along the line. And Metro North sent one of their people who was in charge of operations planning to a meeting in Hackensack, New Jersey. It's my predecessor from London, the House, and others. We went to the public hearing, and he said, I don't care what you do for New Jersey. Your contract with us is the X number of trains a day, and I don't care. He said, those trains will serve Rockland County. If you want to run them express through New Jersey, that's up to you. But we've contracted with you for these number of trains, and you're going to run those trains. So guess what? Service cuts happen on every other line except for Port Jervis and Prospect down the line. So the trains are still going to have to run, and hopefully they won't cut back on the amount of time we get them, because they're responsible for 65% of all the costs by statute. 65% is New Haven, is Connecticut, and then 35% is New York.
And we had talked about in the comments, so the TMRB item later on in new business, but congestion pricing is also heavily on their minds. They're unsurprisingly receiving feedback from drivers in Westchester, not looking forward to paying that.
Right. Nobody has actually stood up and said, I can't wait.
Right.
Transit applicants.
Well, no, it's all.
Yeah, transit.
We all can't wait for less traffic.
Right, but they are, but nobody has stood up and say, I can't wait to pay a toll. They've said, I can't wait for less traffic, I can't wait for better transit, I can't wait for less congestion, I can't wait to be able to cut the air with a butter knife instead of a steak knife.
They're fully informed about the importance of it for the capital plan. They
Sure.
support that. They are I think generally sympathetic to the idea that broader, making the fare broader and lower is or the congestion pricing fee broader and lower is the right approach. But I think to the extent there's future comment opportunities, or I think we just want to keep them involved with whatever committee.
So there will be future comment opportunities. I don't know if you want me to talk about what happened last night. If there's any, unless there's any questions, what we've talked about so far. So there was a rather lively meeting of the traffic mobility review board last night.
I'll watch it.
That last meeting, it was scheduled from 4 to 5 p.m. and it went from 4 to 5:15. Which was
It's on 4:15, actually, it's on 4:15.
okay, well, that's because everybody needed to sign in. And, well, no, but all of the people in the audience needed to be signed in. And there was one person taking. So it was a cumbersome process. I would imagine I'll do it a little bit differently next time. There were introductions at the table, but it started with a presentation by the MTA. By folks who've been working very hard on this process from the beginning. And who we've been working with closely as well. And they talked about it, that this is a delicate balancing exercise. It is essentially a charge to the TMRB board members. The toll must change driver behavior and reduce congestion in TMRB. The goal is to keep tolls low, but still in the range of the revenue target, which is $15 billion. For the capital program after bonding. Every discount and exemption requires a higher toll rate overall. Higher toll rates encourage more people to avoid the CBD and toll, which means that traffic it diverts and potentially goes to environmental justice communities. And the recommended tolling structure should be within the bounds of what's studied in the environmental assessment. There were 3 exemptions that were spelled out in the initial authorizing legislation that was in the budget. And a couple of other exemptions or charges to the TMRB that were put in as a result of that were written into the final bonds, the final finding of no significant impact. Including no charge from 12 a.m. from midnight to 4 a.m. And a question was raised by John Samuelson, who is the head of TWU and sits on the MTA board, and also from a new member who is represents Long Island and represents labor in his day job. Also about, well, that doesn't really reflect shift work. That if I observe, if I go to work from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. am I being charged twice? Because you're only supposed to be charged once a day. So what's a day? So is it a 24-hour period? Is it a calendar day? So essentially what there were 7 items for the TMRB to consider. And the TMRB went back to the MTA staff and asked them to do some additional analysis for their consideration. There were 122 requests for exemptions. Number 1 was artists, number 2 was farmers. And there was it 57 requests for people to not be exempted. So
A lot of overlap.
yeah, there was definitely a lot of overlap.
Well, when we were sitting in the board conference before we went to the meeting starting yesterday morning, they have NY1 on one of the screens. And it was showing the list of when the retired NYPD was ones that was
Right.
listed up.
I mean, those of us who sat through the hundreds of hours of the public hearings that happened. We heard all of the exemptions. There was somebody with a motorcycle helmet. But that was a very strong contention that came.
So what are the other two besides the 12 a.m. to 4 a.m.?
There for people who are under $50,000, if you travel into $60,000, if you travel more than 10 times, there's a 25% reduction in a monthly basis. And the third was about taxis and for hire vehicles being told once a day.
But we people would run bikes.
But the group of advocates with which we work, that's part of the Congestion Pricing Now Coalition, submitted a letter to TMRB after a lot of analysis by some of the member organizations. Suggesting, and also conversation with the MTA to see if it was feasible without changing the terms of the environmental assessment. And finding of no significant impact. See if it would be feasible to not charge the taxis at all the yellow cabs, and that was something that we heard from some of the people who work within administrations. That they would be open to, but that the high volume for hire vehicles, aka Uber and Lyft, who I am not a lobbyist for. That's a topic for, get into that after this moment. That the charge instead be passed on a per rider basis as it is now to the riders, to, on a per trip basis, that it be broken out on a per trip basis as it is now. Because the drivers for those two industries are considered environmental justice industries. There's also a fund that's available for environmental justice communities to address and mitigate any unanticipated effects of driving, of additional driving or diversions to those communities. There's money that will go to electrification of trucks in the Bronx and for charging infrastructure, and for other improving air filtration in schools and other public facilities that are along parks that are along the way, or any potential environmental justice communities. So those are baked in. The other recommendations that have been submitted, not just by the Congestion Pricing Now Coalition, but some other elected officials, was to consider ways to reduce toll shopping. So that you don't say, oh, well, if there's an exemption or you get a reduced, if you get your toll credited for driving over through one of the tunnels, but not over the GW, or if you get it over the GW but not through the tunnels, is that going to change behavior? The behavior that is intended to change is to reduce driving in the central business district. The concern that a number of us have is to make sure that the unintended consequences are not to find a way to make it really, really cheap for somebody to go one way and really expensive for them to go the other way. So there are a lot of,
Like we had with the Verrazano narrows.
with the Verrazano narrows, there are free bridges now that come into Manhattan, into the central business district. Are those tolls, are people who use those going to be tolled at a higher rate than people who go into the Queens Midtown Tunnel and things of that nature?
So, just so I'm clear on this, our objective is to reduce congestion. So why are we not, and I agree that the Uber rider passenger should pay, but why won't the taxi passenger pay?
Rather than a taxi driver to pay.
No, it's not, so that on a yellow cab, so yellow cabs, before the proliferation of Ubers and Lyfts, medallions were worth $1 million or so dollars.
Right.
Now we're lucky if it was a quarter of that.
Nothing, yeah.
So the driver population has decreased substantially, and their
Many of them
investment
bankrupt.
has declined substantially.
So are we saying that the yellow cab passenger will pay also?
Well, they're already, if you take the yellow cab now, you're paying a congestion fee south of 96th Street. You're paying $250 in the yellow and $275 in a 400 vehicle. So that money's already, since 2019, been contributing to the NTA's capital program and the subway action.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think they also want to make sure that the cost of a taxi is competitive with Ubers and Lyfts, because Uber and Lyft can afford to alter their prices for competition, and so to make sure that they still get business for taxis.
And taxis are set by statute. So there's a lot of moving parts. This is the first of several meetings. The audience was stacked and stocked largely by app-based workers, which are defined in this instance as for-hire vehicle workers. And there was one guy with a red wristband, everybody else had a yellow one. And it became very clear at the end of the conference why he was wearing a red wristband, but he's a disruptor. The reason I joked before about whether I'm a lobbyist for Lyft or Uber was because at the MTA board meeting yesterday, I was accused of being a lobbyist, pointed at, accused of being on the take and a lobbyist for Uber, Lyft, and transportation alternatives.
Verbally assault.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, yeah, why would be spending all my millions of dollars from prison, right? It's stupid, yeah.
Was that by a board member?
No, this is by a gadfly who has a long history of abusing women verbally and encroaching physically, so.
One question that I had, and something that I read, they were talking about how the interest that the transit system pays is the big issue in terms of long-term viability.
Mhm.
So what are we doing, or are we just continuing to have high interest? I mean, is there any consideration, any thought, or is that, or does it just get to a point where we can't have a transit system anymore because we can't afford it? But what is being done if we're paying more in interest than we are in anything else?
So the one of the things that Kevin Mullins, the COO, did CFO, did to address that issue was to use some pandemic money to start paying off bonds and to bring down some of the higher rates. And there will be, we continue to be the need to bond and to pay bonds, and in fact, it's a really solid form of investing for a lot of people because they know that it's backed by so much by state and the authority. I own none. It's there. But that has been and continues to be a source of concern, particularly as the percentage of debt has crept up, and the fact that operating funding goes to pay off that debt. So getting it under control is a big issue, and that, I think that they're taking steps to do that with paying off a chunk of it, but then, there are still, it's going to be, fiscal management is really important. So the MTA announced yesterday, and they briefed us on that, or last week, was the further development of their open data portal. So for our folks who like to play around with numbers,
Believe it or not, there's a lot of them.
there's the MTA's open data portal has an increasing amount of information, including financial information and including capital program and construction information about what's going to be about what's being spent and about the different projects. They were required to do that under legislation that was introduced by Senator Conway and Assemblymember Bobby Carroll and signed by the governor. And they've sort of accepted the challenge robustly.
I took this screenshot, so it's open data, OPEN data at mtahq.org. Then there's also metrics.mta.info and data.n1.gov. Those three. I haven't had a chance to look at them, but all our meetings are over for this week. I will honestly try to sit down and record something.
No. I have a question on it. Yes,
Please.
the 122 is the team that's assembled. Are they going to weight the 122 down into any sort of sector? Because you could hardly say I'm in the planning industry and I travel to New York. You could arguably say maybe they're a commercial driver, and so the commercial industry, I'm sure, has its thoughts and opinions on this, and so how they rate, and then they have subgroups that way. the team and mobility board, has a better understanding.
Yes.
Selfishly.
Yep.
I was just gonna say selfishly from the Metro North perspective, and it's so much spectrum around. We wanna have, okay, psychologically, who do we want, or who do we hope will convert from being a car driver to a mass transit user, that very, 0.00% that would actually convert when the next moves forward. Is there a particular audience that we target? Because obviously there's going to be, a vast amount of communications from the marketing and Shanica's team, customer to kind of, how do we attract those people in the market to them, and whether it's incentives or whatever, I'll leave it up to other people, but.
So they did break down into different categories in the 122. And the 122 different of that group. But what the MTA also did was look at they asked the MTA, they asked the TMRB to look at 7 different factors. Discounts by time period. What time of day should the standard rate apply in the overnight rate? Should there be a rate between standard and overnight? And what should the discount be for each time period? And the recommendations as well. Should there be, what should there be? Should there be, and what should there be discounts for those already paying a toll? And should drivers already paying to use tolled facilities to enter the CBD get a discount, also known as a crossing credit, on the cost of the CBD toll? They asking them to look at toll rates for buses, and there are different categories of buses. Public transit agencies, including the MTA, which are not exempt by statute. Private buses, including Academy, Rockland. Private use buses, which are the 2-story, sightseeing buses. Intercity and regional buses, Greyhound, Hampton Jitney, and school buses. We, as a coalition, recommended basically all buses except the sightseeing buses be exempt. The recommendations needed on the buses are there certain types of buses that should be exempt or discounted? Should other buses pay the auto rate or a higher rate? And should buses be charged once a day or every time they enter the zone? Passenger vehicles are charged once a day, but buses don't have that same exemption. Toll rates for trucks. There are 2 different kinds of trucks. Small trucks, which are considered non-articulated, which are like a box truck or a cargo van, commercial cargo van, or large trucks, which are the tractor trailers with a cab.
33-foot usually.
Articulated. Yeah. And those recommendations needed are: should trucks pay a different rate than autos? Should large trucks pay more than small trucks? And should trucks be charged more than once a day? Be charged once a day or every time they enter the zone? We asked that they consider charging them on a per axle basis, as they are on toll facilities. The next is toll rates for government-owned vehicles. City of New York has approximately 19,000. MTA has approximately 4,200. Port Authority has about 2,200. Federal, state, and other government have about 2,700 vehicles. And there are specialized vehicles designed to perform public works like sanitation trucks. There are vehicles used to transport goods to support government functions, standard vans, trucks, other vehicles, and vehicles for personnel transport, used to travel to work sites, offices, or meetings. So they are being asked to recommend, are there certain types of government vehicles that should be exempt from tolls or receive some type of discount?
So like trucks that are going out there to do.
Going to pick up the garbage.
Also, but also doing construction is the speed.
Right.
Utilities.
What's a utility considered? And that's
And what do you have
considered
about
private
500
vehicle.
trucks?
Right.
That's what I use, I call this.
Number 6 is a plan for taxis and for hire vehicles. There are yellow taxis, green taxis, which still exist but are being phased on. black cars, liveries, and limos, and app-based for hire vehicles such as Uber and Lyft. And they're being asked a plan for those. On average, a taxi makes nearly 12 trips a day to from or within the CBD, and a for hire vehicle makes nearly 6. Says a fun fact. And then, yes, the other discounts exemptions. So the categories are individuals and groups, artists, farmers, musicians, parents, small business owners, senior citizens, veterans. The next group is government agencies and workers, all government workers, detectives, NYPD, teachers, private carriers providing buses. The next is for hire vehicles, black cars, taxis, medical, caretakers, first responders, medical patients. There is baked in an exemption for people with disabilities traveling with in accessorized vehicles. Vehicles that are dedicated to transporting people with disabilities, with disabled plates from New York or other states. Another category is income related, low income drivers, low income residents. Again, there are some exemptions or discounts that are baked in either from the original legislation or that which was provided in the final policy. Another category is residents. Brooklyn, Manhattan CBD, Manhattan not CBD, Long Island, Manhattan, New York City, New York State, Orange County, Rockland County, Staten Island, Waterside Plaza, commuters living in CBD. The next type is vehicle users or types, carpoolers, agricultural transporting farm products, delivery vehicles, diplomatic plate vehicles, electric vehicles, purses, low trucks, trucks.
That was exactly what I was thinking.
Well, yeah, this is not.
Here's another category is drivers.
Literally just drivers.
And another category is workers.
So, 2 questions. There's the board, are they set up to quote unquote do the benchmarking or research on, hey, how did London succeed? How did Singapore or Seoul, or other countries, I think Paris, another one, where those cities have, so, do they have 100 some odd constituents, or 100 some categories, or are we no different? Just so we can go, all right, four cities in major countries that have very dense, have succeeded with these major categories, and the one-offs we address, in a separate way. So I don't know if they have that set up.
So they do, and the staff at the MTA that's been working on this, it's been exceptional. I mean, they are, Allison Soreno, who is leading this, is just, she's got a brilliant mind in like all the best ways. She's just incredible, and she's been.
All day, this is yesterday.
Right, I mean, he's really been at this from the start. He's worked at the Rubin Center Store, the Port Authority on bridges, like running the bridges. She works at TBTA now, but she's really led this. Mike Bojar, who has done a lot of the office work and the political work, and the innovative side of it, Juliet Michelson and all of their staffs who are looking at what's happened in other places, but also, they've looked at things like if you reduce the so if you provide a discount on the CBD toll for those paying a tunnel toll changes the CBD base toll and the burden of who pays for it, right? So they're looking at this, they did the analysis that if the base toll is low, that it's essentially equal in terms of trips and revenue for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut and other. So New York takes 70% of the trips, they pay 72% of the revenue, New Jersey, 20% of the trips, 18% of the revenue, Connecticut 3%, 2% of the revenue, and other 7%, and 8% of the revenue. And we have a high base toll. Then New York ends up paying taking 68% of the trips, but paying 78% of the revenue. New Jersey takes 21% of the trips, and pays 11% of the revenue. Connecticut, 3% of the trips, 4% of the revenue, and other 8% of the trips, and 7% of the revenue.
Can you send that to us?
I can send you all of these. I'll put them together in a way that you're not
Because
looking.
We wonder why New Jersey think they're so special.
There's been some
Every
really,
time I go across the Washington Bridge, it's like I'm saying, "Wait a minute."
so I have season Jets tickets. If you didn't feel sorry for me before, you should feel sorry for me now. We spend a lot of time, spending a lot of money in New Jersey, and nobody has ever asked me if I would like a discount on my tolls. Yeah, we pay this going and coming, you know.
Listen, I go GWB all the time between here and Bethesda, and every time I go through, it's like I have to refill my
Yeah.
automatic easy passes, you know? And I keep hearing New Jersey people, I don't get why they're so
Well,
special.
the thing that really drives me nuts is the only way you could possibly ever see the Rockefeller Christmas tree is to drive your family into the heart of Midtown at Christmas time. I won't even walk in the heart of Christmas town, you know, it's a Christmas town in Midtown, right? I mean, so there's been some really great analysis that's been done by the Regional Plan Association, by Tri-State, by the MTA, by reInvent Albany on what the benefits to New Jersey of congestion pricing will be. But that doesn't get splashy ink.
Yep.
So there are some really strong supporters of congestion pricing in New Jersey. They don't happen to be the elected officials who are holding press conferences in front of towns.
Okay.
So yes, we'll put this together
Was there
along with the reports.
a timeline? So
So the
what's their deadline?
there
for-
was not there, but from what we understand, and you know, this could change based on anything, nothing's written in any stone that we've seen. From what we have heard, we anticipate recommendations to the MTA board in September at the September board meeting. So that means that there will be additional meetings of the TMRB. I would imagine that it will depend largely on how much analysis needs to be done by MTA staff. And there was some really great questions yesterday. It showed that this is not signed off. This is not a document that's a rubber stamp. This is a group of people with opinions who are representing who they're supposed to represent. And then after the recommendations go to the board, there's another state process known as a SAPA process. That will provide another opportunity for public comment. Yeah, that will be, and then probably December, January would be the board meeting that the final whole
No.
amounts would be go through for implementation then in April or May. Assuming, this is assuming no lawsuits. Or if things can proceed as on a concurrent track as any lawsuits. We've already seen that the FHW, right, at the feds have said that they're going, that there is not the basis for an EIS, which is what several of the electeds in New Jersey have asked for.
Yeah.
An environmental impact statement as opposed to the environmental assessment, which some people would consider an EIS light, but the EA that they did, it was probably the heaviest one that's been
Yeah.
lifted in a very long.
They said it was one of the most robust EAs in NEPA history for congestion pricing.
So we know that this will be paving the way for a lot of other cities and in a lot of other states. I was just at a conference in Washington and asked to speak on this, and I was the only person talking about congestion pricing. Everybody else was talking about electric vehicle charging infrastructure fees. That's how they're raising funding for infrastructure, is through electric vehicle infrastructure. We don't have a robust enough infrastructure for electric vehicles to even contemplate that. In Utah is leaps and bounds ahead of us there. And they're also looking at different kinds of innovative road tolling. To pay for their, not just their roads, but also for their transit, they have these transit system, all things considered.
Whose responsibility is designing the actual system to make it as effective, you know, just someone that,
So there is, the system, it's gonna be an easy pass like system, it's gonna use easy pass. There are gantries that are going to be placed, that contract has already been let. The evasion question is interesting. So at the board meeting, the committee meetings this week, there are also presentations based on the blue ribbon, payment evasion task force recommendations. At each of the different committees, commuter rail, transit, and also bridges and tunnels. Because ghost plates and big plates and bubble plates are a huge issue. And particularly in advance of increased fares and congestion places. They want to make sure, yeah, and tolls. They want to make sure that everything is captured and that there isn't, this isn't just another opportunity for evading. So there was legislation at the city level that was introduced, and I'm not sure it was passed, about, if it hasn't been, it will be, about gross plates and what can be done at the city level. The state undertook legislation as well. And the MTA worked with law enforcement on a number of different levels to have Amazon and eBay and Craigslist stop selling the gold plates and the readers. Basically, you need a piece of surgical tape and a leaf. So you can do it, it's DIY. But now every time I see a paper license plate,
Suspicious.
absolutely. The bridges and tunnel, they talked about having handhelds and portable readers.
Scanning devices and they
So
can
that
grab
they
right away.
Yeah, and the officers at the bridges and the tunnels are really familiar with what a fake plate is. They know that if in New Jersey that it starts with the number 5.
So
And that there
they're,
are no number 3, and if it's a number 3, that's fake.
so they're increasing their,
Surveillance.
They're increasing
Okay.
surveillance, they're increasing interdiction,
Mhm.
they're increasing, they have the law on their side to do more
something good.
catch and keep. As opposed to.
Yeah, I asked, I think, do we get to keep the cars?
I mean, there are people with Lamborghinis who owe $100,000. That's not me.
What's they pay?
Lobbying doesn't
They get
pay
back.
well. It was a joke.
All right. Thank you.
So it's complicated, it's ongoing. Next time we meet, I'm sure that there will be a lot more, because we'll meet, TCAC is the next meeting. In September, and by then, we will have more information on where TMRB is headed and what the next steps are in time.
but we are meeting, aren't we?
With that,
Yeah.
we could talk if you want to talk about now. We could
Sure.
suggested that we have a tour. There's really not much, we've been to, which is the main shop, or what you want, but they took time, I think. And we saw last year, we went to the RTC and Grand Central Madison and track 24, so there's really not much else there. There is a hybrid facility which was built in advance of inside access being built, so we can maintain cars. It's like the past the Hudson line all the time, so that would be like a very short visit, and then we could come back and please grab a lunch, talk about what we had seen, and that would be the office.
Yeah, also to that field trip. We can go visit.
So I've asked, I sent an email to Andy to ask, I don't know if anybody else can help us with that too. Okay.
Where are you trying to hit? What's the word?
Just the hybrid facility.
Hybrid.
Hybrid?
I think it's turning out, yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, they have employee trainings or like.
Oh, every train I've been on, so lately I stopped there, even the Poughkeepsie train stopped there yesterday.
Well,
Yeah.
there's employees.
Oh.
Right. Maybe later in August, I'll be more interested in seeing the new shop that opened up.
Yeah, well, we're gonna plan that for next year.
Yeah.
But this is before me, so I think we should see it. So,
I'm sure it'll be-
okay, so, anything else?
Yeah, when we move on, the congested pricing, the final decision is MTA board, am I right?
Correct, it does not go through a committee.
Right.
It goes
Right.
from the
Right to the board.
TMRB to the board.
And then probably to the courts. That's simple.
Well,
Okay.
Hopefully not.
well, hopefully not, and then there's been a lot of conversation and question about. Should it go to a court in New York? Should it go to a court in New Jersey? If New Jersey's in a lawsuit, should New York bring a lawsuit first?
When in Pierce County, Florida.
Yeah.
Can we stop a judge?
Right. Those conversations.
Okay, we'll see what's
Go
going.
this direction. Did anybody on Zoom have a question about?
Francis, Rich. All right, so let's go to Rich on his low bridge price.
Okay, I have a couple of updates. One for the signs on the low bridges. I haven't been able to meet with the supervisor, the highway supervisor this week because of the severe flooding damage in where I live, the town of Highland. I'm pretty sure you've seen it on the news.
Yes.
Yeah, Route
Were you
32
personally affected?
is what affected?
Were you personally affected by it?
No, I'm on top of the hill, but a lot of homes on Route 32 were affected. In fact, Route 32 is half closed, as well as a lot of other roads that got washed out. So the highway department has been very busy trying to keep up with the work, even, working overtime, trying to get the roads open. And that includes two of the roads to the low bridges that got wiped out. So hopefully by the next meeting, I'll have an update from him as well as the MTA capital project manager. So if we have a meeting in August, I'll have an update there. Also, another update on the TOC Transit Oriented City for Harriman. They're coming into us, the planning board, August 2nd, for a final conceptual plan, which will detail the number of homes or apartments currently between 1,500 to 2,000, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, movie theater, retail stores. After the conceptual plan is finalized and approved by the planning board, the next stage will be the preliminary site plan approval. So this is moving pretty quickly. And again, it's a major development. Actually, it's the second largest development aside from the Woodbury Commons Mall. So it'll probably go on for about 5 years, but we're getting down to the final hours. Once you get preliminary site approval, that's the design and approval of homes and retail stores. They could actually start construction within a year. So I'll keep you updated because they plan to be at the planning board meeting every month thereafter, August 2nd. I haven't heard anything from Metro North, but I will ask at the August 2nd, the developer, who is his primary contact in working with Metro North on the TOC. And I'll try to contact that person as well before the next Metro North Council meeting in August. The next one is just to let you know, I don't know if you heard, but the Woodbury Commons, which is the outdoor mall, is currently submitted a plan to go major expansion. If you've been there, when you drive down to the parking lot, you'll notice to the left, there is a huge parking lot for buses only. They're going to get rid of that parking lot for buses and put in 166 new retail stores, a 5-story, another 5-story parking garage with a heliport on top.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll tell you the story behind that, as well as a major hotel is coming in on that property. So that is big news to Woodbury. Apparently, from the last meeting, it's one of the very few retail outlets on the eastern coast that is growing and making money, Simon's property. So again, they're coming in for that new 5-story garage, heliport, major hotel, new stores. I don't know how that's gonna affect traffic, but I will.
Let me, maybe they'll do one of Oren's pet projects was to have them build and then they pay for an accessible station at Woodbury. Then we get rid of a lot of the buses that will be coming up there.
Well, you know, I've approached them several times, Simon Properties, and what they don't want is commuter parking in the morning. They want it just for the retail people. So what I'm thinking here is maybe we can have a commuter train schedule where the inbound trains in the morning, the earliest would be 10 o'clock. I think it opens 10 o'clock, the mall, where you wouldn't have any morning commuters parking there because there'd be no trains. So you would just have inbound trains, 10 o'clock, and then outbound trains up until the time they close. So I'm going to ask them, would they reconsider that? And I'll get back to you. And then the other thing is, we talked about a shuttle again. I don't know how effective a shuttle would be between Harriman and the mall. Now that you have the TOC. So that's a lot of new development, a lot of new housing, a lot more commuters. Again, is it something viable? I don't know if the Metro North is willing to do another study once the TOC gets final approval and they understand Woodbury Commons is expanding, major expansion. So I was going to put, just ask this board, do you think it's worthwhile talking to Metro North as a second alternative in the event Simon Properties turns down a train stop just for shoppers? Do you think a shuttle is effective between Harriman?
Do you have anybody from Metro North that comes to those village meetings when you're talking about all this stuff?
No.
You should.
Who would
Yeah.
pay for it?
No, I'm just having somebody from the
I
staff.
mean, the shuttle.
I don't know. I'm not looking at a shuttle. I'm looking at, I like the idea of having the station built with restrictions so that it's, that they will know it's only for going shopping.
But I think that it would need to be for people who work there too, so it would need to be before
Oh,
10.
no, definitely. There's very little service before.
If you had service before 10, it's basically southbound or eastbound or Hoboken. So you'd have to live like out in Port Jervis land, but right over to Woodbury.
Well, Metro North had this situation at what a road for many years, thankfully it's zero, that the New Haven trains were allowed to pick up going eastbound.
Oh, that's
towards
great.
New Haven at Water Road, and inbound, they could only drop it off. But that got resolved, at least. They carried it, but he was former carry rollers, it was.
Oh, I wondered what the rationale was.
They had, it was a revenue thing, in the state of Connecticut. That's a very long story, you don't want to know.
I don't know.
It's on the files. When you pull the file, yeah, the files.
Yeah, in
Because
fact,
I wouldn't even know, who we could suggest from Metro North staff that could go there and just listen to what they're planning to do.
Okay, I see, you'll pass that on. All right, and then but I think it's a great idea to have, limited service to that new station if it was ever built.
Yeah, and again, if you could pass me along a name for Metro North, I could fill them in and send them, just as I send you the documentation on the TOC. I could ask them to come to the meeting and we could see if they're gonna represent the Metro North for the TOC project. And I'll tell you, Simon Properties announced they're going ahead, and they also announced it's the richest outdoor mall in the United States and growing. So I expect it to go pretty quickly from what they said.
I'm surprised that people who live anywhere near there are gonna go for help.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea to have a station. They don't have to build any parking. Because they already have-
The reason with the heliport, they did a survey with their customers. Most of them don't even live in the area. A lot of them are from out of state. A good percent are international travelers
Yes.
that come with suitcases to buy at the mall. And they said they were willing to pay for a helicopter to go from New York City to there just to go shopping.
Well, that's because there's no Metro North stop.
Right? People from my building, get their suitcases there, but I didn't work very well for the American dream. Just saying.
So you'll probably,
There's only 13 trains a day that go up that way, so.
yeah. So I will bring that up at the August 2nd meeting, and as the information is announced in the local papers, I'll send you those articles.
Great, well, we will connect, we'll get Andy to be in touch with you too.
Okay, that'd be great.
Harriman 9:35, 11:14, 150, then 5:12. Then it's 5:53, 6:12. Yeah, so it's pretty much an afternoon based. It should not be a thing used for people trying to commute. Okay, so that takes care of that. Francis, do you have anything before we move to the next section? You can sit there and ask patiently, quietly. Is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, everyone's covering everything.
Okay, so I guess
That's great.
Let's shut down.
No, it's still running.
So the social media update, there's a few things. So of course, I'm sure you can imagine that the major incidents of the rainfall and storm that led to service being canceled got the most attention on social media. People just commenting about their trains being canceled and such, but it seemed like people were appreciative that service was up and running within just a few days,
Yeah.
so that's good. And also there were a few major signal issues like Mike had raised earlier this month that people just asking questions about delays. Another thing that I noticed was that there were a few questions about the fare increase before it had been voted on. And it seemed like there was a little bit of a lapse in information between the Metro North account and the other MTA accounts. Because some of the responses were, someone asked, for example, if the 10% monthly discount would still apply on after the fare increase, and the account had replied saying they don't have the information about that. Of course, that was before the vote, so they didn't know if that would actually happen, but that person had not been updated after the vote since yesterday. So that was just one thing I noticed, and then also a few other questions about, there was on Sunday a delay on Harlem, Hudson, and New Haven lines because the tweet said there was a bridge strike in the Park Avenue tunnel, and a lot of people had replied asking what that meant. Even just what a bridge strike is in general, just so I think just the wording of some of the updates had led to some questions, but in general, the Metro North account has been very responsive. Answering people's questions.
And I got an alert from New Jersey Transit that rain number 1623 was now delayed yesterday. Not train, rain.
Oh, rain number 16.
The rain was delayed a little bit. But did we include the answer to, thank you, Karen. Do we include the answer, Mike, to your question in here? Yes,
Yeah.
we did. The July 6th was the date that you had asked about, right? I don't think that we put that in here, but we will. Will you? Kim?
That's,
Yeah, it's sent.
I think you get.
Follow Metro North on Reds.
Wow. There's too much going on right now.
MNRCC for a tough evening. Well, that was. Was yours. In discussing. All right, in discussing with mud maintenance and way of learning Metro North, we heard roughly 12 separate issues regarding maintenance of lake assets on July 16th. Several were heat related, overheating of signal locations, and difficulty throwing switches due to the expansion of rail, etc. A few failures were related to 40-year-old relays and signal components. To prevent issues going forward, we have adopted a modified switching plan on high temperature days, which we have had a number of this week. I am happy to report that we have not seen the same issues that we did on the 6th since then.
That's great. That's
So that was the answer.
Sorry, I didn't make it in.
Yeah, my thought was very stupid. So
Randy, was that it?
No. This was extremely handy to.
yeah. Yeah, you know, it's just always concerned that an evening like that becomes an early warning of recurring across the summer. It hasn't really. That's great. That's a great good thing.
Especially if, because we've had nothing but hot.
Right.
So, yeah.
But regarding that point, I'd be curious at some point to hear from a risk management person from Metro North in terms of what we're doing to adjust to climate change and flooding and heat and so forth, because it's worse. I've heard.
To do that going forward. That's the next time we actually.
Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie's team from C and D have done some, at least one, two presentations last, 6 months to the MCA board or committees in regards to this area. So, call it what you want. Climate mitigation.
Yeah, thinking that would be good, because I know that they have, that they built their team. Resiliency and sustainability.
Yeah, because the way the capital programs, correct me if I'm wrong, is each month there's different themes or topics. How they build it in, over the 12 months or the 11 months.
It's the word.
There work, but that person or group of people would probably be, the area you could say, hey, we'd love to have you, speak on that, specific, activities for. Specifically for Metro North.
Thank you for the idea. Okay,
Yeah.
now we know.
That would be, yeah.
Put in the request.
Okay.
Request regarding the fare increase and all of that. I saw what they did. One of the things they did was to eliminate the 20-trip ticket.
Yes,
And I never heard the rationale for that. Did anybody talk about that as to why they wanted to eliminate? Because that was something Westchester County has suggested some time back. They put it in and.
yeah, it was something that Jerry and MNRCC were strongly in support of.
Like Atlantic Ticket Weekly.
Yeah, so Atlantic Ticket Weekly is resting, not dead. We hope that it will become, it will metamorphosize into a city ticket weekly, and we have done or have evolved.
And a lot of the board members supported the system.
Yeah.
Hello?
Andrew gave a.
Atlantic Ticket could evolve into some grander. The 20-trip ticket heard a number of different things. One is that and that the rates of increase to make it work fiscally would have had to been so significant that it wouldn't have been to make it work financially for the MTA would have made it prohibitive for commuters and trainees. So, there were a couple of different presentations. There wasn't a lot of, I think nobody, maybe one or two people mentioned it during the fair hearings. A lot of people talked about Atlantic Ticket and about City Ticket, but there was not any strong support for the 20 trip.
I wonder how many of you guys told, I mean, if they weren't selling them, obviously there's no need to continue having them, but. Did anybody talk about what the ticket sales were?
Did they talk about that for, I mean, well,
And-
for Atlantic Ticket, that's, we're gonna take that off. Because that's not available on e-tickets, they haven't advertised it, et cetera. Well, we heard you first from muted,
Yeah,
but now you're muted.
Oh, can you hear me now?
yeah.
Who we have the pleasure of hearing?
Hello, I'm LaSalle. I am from Westchester and I do use the 20 ticket a lot. And when I first heard I was being canceled, I was quite disappointed because I'm in this weird position where I work hybridly and a 10 ticket is not enough, but the 20 ticket was just enough. And now I have to pay like the 10 ticket twice.
Right.
And if I were to pay monthly, it feels like almost like a ripoff to me because it doesn't give me like a free transfer to subway or gives me like unlimited metro pass like to subways at the subway. So I'm just wondering if they're going to get rid of the 20 ticket, how they're going to increase value for people who work hybridly.
That's a great question.
But that gets back to what I said about looking at the new work schedules and ensuring that the duties that we offer are consistent with what people need. Nobody needs what few people need a monthly anymore.
Streamlining, that's
Yeah.
one of the things that.
So, yeah, there was a rationale. I would have to go back
For the 20 trip,
for the 20 trip.
they had said that they looked at the demographics of each of the ticket type sales. And they found that the 20 trip was overwhelmingly used by the highest income bracket. And it would need to be raised significantly.
I'm not quite sure how they get that demographic data,
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't know how that's.
The same way they know that you didn't activate your ticket on the phone and you waited until you were on the train. Did you know about that?
They also, you know, I think
People text.
to your point, though, that I think that they didn't do a good job of really promoting the 20 trip. They didn't make it available as many places as you could get your monthly. There is no more, yeah, there's no more with the dissolution, temporary dissolution of the Atlantic ticket. There are no more tickets that have a commuter rail transit tie-in until Omni is born, fully born, which is why we're asking for a feasibility and field study for a weekly city ticket. But to your point, LaSalle, there, you know, I think that there are a lot of people who will realize that that loss of that 20 trip ticket has happened. And that without the ability to also get a transit ticket, you should try the tap, because you only pay for what you use for on transit. So if you buy a weekly, you may not use it for an entire week, but if you tap, you pay as you tap as you
Pay as you go.
pay as you go, thank you. If you use it 5 times, you pay 5 times. So I think it's still a learning process, and perhaps at the next MTA board meeting in September, you could, even though it seems to be a done deal at this point, they will be having more, they'll be re-looking at fares within the next 15 months, and we'll be back again. So,
You can still come to the public porch,
yeah, you can absolutely raise your comments and your concerns at the public portion of a committee meeting or board meeting. If you go on the mta.info website, I just always Google MTA board meetings. And it takes me to when and where. And you can do it, you can sign up remotely.
I got an email from a friend.
Thank you. For next time,
I was upset that they didn't do anything to address his concern, but of course he didn't speak about it. I would discuss it to allow seniors that have their on inbound trainings in the morning on this north and allow their.
We've been working on that too.
But nobody even mentioned that.
We did.
Another caveat.
The 22.
Okay, we want to make it one. All right, so is there anything else? So we're going to hear about August 18th. So 17th, you'll
That will not be in St. Louis. That's like the hottest place I could think of after Texas. Where I've already been.
Okay, so then we'll make a motion to adjourn. Can I get a second?
So, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the summer, and we'll see some of you, all of you next month.
What's the date of that?
The 17th.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.